Did you know that the destiny of an entire nation, the very idea of America as we know it, once hung by a single, fraying thread over 3 sweltering summer days? What if I told you that the fate of millions rested not on a grand, elaborate plan, but on a series of chance encounters, moments of profound hesitation, and a single act of breathtaking defiance? You can feel it, can't you? The oppressive heat of a Pennsylvania summer in 1863. The air is thick, not just with humidity, but with something else. A low thrum of anticipation that you can almost taste, like ozone before a storm. The scent of clover and freshly cut hay is slowly being replaced by the smell of dust, sweat, and gunpowder. Few people truly understand how a moment of supreme confidence, a belief that victory was preordained, could lead to an act of ultimate desperation that would either forge a new country or forever shatter an old one. This isn't just a story of generals and armies, but of the individual hearts that beat within them, of pride, of fear, and of choices made in the crucible of chaos. Before we journey back to that fateful summer, I'm curious, where in the world are you right now, and what time is it? Let me know in the comments below. It's always fascinating to see where our community is settling in from, sharing this quiet moment together. Now, let your mind drift back to the early summer of 1863. For the Confederate Army of Northern Virginia, the world felt electric. You are there, among them, marching north. Just weeks before, at a place called Chancellorsville, you witnessed a miracle. Your army, outnumbered more than 2 to 1, had faced the mighty Union Army of the Potomac, and through sheer audacity and the brilliance of your commander, Robert E. Lee, had won a stunning, almost unbelievable victory. It's a powerful psychological phenomenon, isn't it? When success validates a belief so completely that it feels like divine providence. The men around you walk with a swagger. They believe they are invincible, and they believe their general, this dignified, almost paternal figure of Lee, is the chosen instrument of God's will. It's a dangerous cocktail of faith and pride, a form of confirmation bias on a massive scale, where every victory reinforces the belief that the next is inevitable. The Bible is full of such stories, of a chosen people overcoming impossible odds. And for these men, they were living out their own chapter. But beneath this shimmering surface of confidence lies a current of cold, hard reality. Your uniform is worn thin. Your shoes, if you even have them, are falling apart. Your stomach rumbles with a constant gnawing hunger. The state of Virginia, your home, has been bled white by 2 years of relentless war. Its farms are fallow, its storehouses empty. Lee, for all his genius, is not a god. He is a pragmatist, and he knows his magnificent army cannot survive on morale alone. It needs food, it needs horses, it needs shoes, medicine, and ammunition. And so, the decision is made. A grand invasion of the North. The plan is both simple and audacious. You will move the war out of Virginia, giving your homeland a chance to breathe, to heal. You will march into the lush, untouched farmlands of Pennsylvania and take what you need. It is a raid on a colossal scale, yet there is more to it than just logistics. Historians still debate whether Lee's primary motivation was to feed his army or to strike a mortal political blow. A decisive victory on northern soil, perhaps even the capture of a major city like Philadelphia or Baltimore, could shatter the Union's will to continue the fight. It could convince European powers like Great Britain and France, who were watching with keen interest, to finally recognize the Confederacy as a sovereign nation and intervene on its behalf. It was a gamble for the highest stakes imaginable, a single roll of the dice to end the war. You feel this duality as you march, the confidence of a soldier in a conquering army, and the deep, unspoken understanding that this is a desperate, all-or-nothing gambit. One of Lee's greatest challenges, however, was an internal one. After Chancellorsville, his most trusted commander, the eccentric and brilliant General Stonewall Jackson, was gone. accidentally shot by his own men and succumbing to pneumonia. Lee had to reorganize his army, promoting men like Richard Ewell and A.P. Hill to lead new corps. They were good commanders, but the almost telepathic understanding he shared with Jackson was gone. This new command structure was powerful, but it was also untested. Could these men interpret Lee's famously discretionary orders, like if practicable, with the same aggressive intuition that Jackson had? The fate of the invasion might just depend on it. As you continue your march north, a strange sense of unreality sets in. You are an invader, an alien presence in this peaceful, prosperous land. The barns here are not burned-out husks, but painted a vibrant, defiant red. The fields are not scarred by trenches, but are heavy with ripening wheat. The locals watch you from their porches, with a mixture of fear and contempt, their faces like stone. It's a stark contrast to the welcoming cheers you received in Virginia. Here, you are the enemy, and while your army is confident, it is also blind. General Lee's eyes and ears, the flamboyant cavalry commander, J.E.B. Stuart, has been given permission to ride around the Union Army, gathering intelligence and causing a bit of havoc. It's a move that has become one of the most debated subjects of the campaign. Was Stuart following orders, or was he on a glory-seeking ride that starved his commander of vital information? Whatever the reason, the result is the same. Lee's massive army, over 70,000 strong, is moving deep into enemy territory without knowing where its opponent is. It's like a giant fumbling in the dark, powerful but disoriented. Now, imagine yourself on the other side. You are a soldier in the Union's Army of the Potomac. Your morale is at rock bottom. The defeat at Chancellorsville was not just a loss, it was a humiliation. Your general, Fighting Joe Hooker, who had boasted of his plans, was thoroughly outmaneuvered and seemed to lose his nerve at the critical moment. Whispers of incompetence and indecision ripple through the ranks. Back in Washington, President Abraham Lincoln is growing desperate. He has lost faith in Hooker, and in a shocking move, just 3 days before the largest battle of the war is set to begin, he replaces him. The new commander is General George Gordon Meade, a competent, if notoriously bad-tempered, career soldier. You might see him for the first time as he takes command. A man thrust into a position of immense responsibility with almost no time to prepare. He doesn't know the exact disposition of his own army, let alone the enemy's. So now both armies, two colossal forces of nearly 170,000 men combined, are stumbling through the rolling hills of Pennsylvania, each desperately seeking information about the other, and at the center of it all lies a town. It is not a fortress or a major city. It's a quiet, prosperous market town called Gettysburg. It is home to a Lutheran seminary, a college for young women, and a population of just 2,400 souls. Visually, it's a picture of idyllic American life. Brick-paved streets, white picket fences, the smell of bread baking. Its only real significance is something you can see on any map. It's a hub, like the center of a wheel, with 10 roads radiating out from its center. Whoever controls Gettysburg controls the local road network, a crucial advantage for any army trying to maneuver and concentrate its forces. But neither Lee nor Meade has chosen this town as a battleground. Fate, and the simple geometry of roads, is about to make the decision for them. You've likely heard the famous story that the Battle of Gettysburg started because the Confederates were looking for shoes. A division of soldiers under General Henry Hett marched towards the town after hearing a rumor of a supply of footwear stored there. It's a charming and very human detail, one that has persisted for over a century. And while it's true that your Confederate comrades were chronically short of shoes, most historians now view this as a convenient simplification. The reality is that Hett was ordered to scout towards Gettysburg to ascertain the strength of the Union militia believed to be there. The shoes were, at best, a secondary objective, a hopeful bonus. The battle was not born of a need for footwear, but of a collision course set by two blind armies. The roads were the arteries, and they were all pumping soldiers toward one unsuspecting heart, the town of Gettysburg. As the last day of June gives way to the 1st of July, you can feel the tension coiling. The pieces are moving on the board, guided by incomplete information and sheer chance. A Confederate column approaches from the west, a Union cavalry division from the south. They are on a trajectory to meet on a ridge just outside of town. The residents of Gettysburg are about to wake up to a day that will forever etch their small town into the memory of a nation. The sun rises on the morning of July 1st, burning the mist off the fields west of Gettysburg. You are now a Union cavalryman, one of the troopers under the command of Brigadier General John Buford. You have been in the saddle for days, scouting, probing, living on coffee and nervous energy. Unlike the infantry, your job is to be the eyes of the army, and last night, your eyes saw something big. You reported Confederate infantry moving towards town in force. Now, you stand on a long, gentle rise of land called McPherson's Ridge, looking west down the Chambersburg Pike. Your commander, Buford, is a man who understands the grim mathematics of war. He is not a flashy showman like Stuart. He is a professional, with a keen eye for terrain. He looks at the landscape not for its beauty, but for its tactical value, like a grand, deadly chessboard. And he has realized something of profound importance. The high ground south of Gettysburg, Cemetery Hill, Culp's Hill, and the Round Tops, is the key to everything. Whoever holds that ground will have an almost insurmountable defensive advantage. Your mission this morning is simple and suicidal. You and your 2,700 cavalrymen are to hold off the advance of an entire Confederate infantry corps. It's an impossible task, a delaying action of the highest order. You are a speed bump on the road to Armageddon, meant to buy precious time for the Union infantry. The powerful First Corps under General John Reynolds to hurry up the road and secure those vital hills. As you wait, you check your weapon, and here you have a secret advantage. You are not armed with a clumsy, slow-loading, muzzle-loading musket. You carry a Sharps single-shot, breech-loading carbine. You can fire it 2 or 3 times faster than your opponent. Some of your comrades even have 7-shot Spencer repeating carbines. In a firefight, this technological edge means a small force can put out a volume of fire that makes it seem much larger than it really is. It's a psychological trick as much as a tactical one. Around 7:30 in the morning, you see them, a long column of men in butternut and gray, marching steadily down the road. This is General Hett's division, the men who are supposedly coming for shoes. They expect to brush aside a few local militia, not a division of veteran Union cavalry. A single figure on a horse, a lieutenant named Marcellus Jones, rides forward, rests a carbine on a fence post, and fires. The shot echoes across the fields, a sharp crack that signals the beginning of the end for so many. Historians still debate the precise identity of the soldier who fired the very first shot, but tradition holds that this was the moment the battle began. Suddenly, the entire ridge erupts in gunfire. You and your fellow troopers, dismounted and fighting like infantrymen, take cover behind fences and trees, pouring a rapid, stinging fire into the advancing Confederate lines. The Confederates are surprised, then confused. The sheer volume of fire coming from the ridge is staggering. They believe they have run into a major Union infantry force. They halt, deploy into battle lines, and begin a more cautious, deliberate advance. Every minute they spend deploying is another minute bought for the Union Army. You fight with a cool desperation. You are not trying to win this fight. You are simply trying to survive it, to slow them down, to make them pay for every single yard of ground. It's a brutal, bloody affair. You fire, reload, fire again, the barrel of your carbine growing hot in your hands. You see men fall on both sides. The beautiful Pennsylvania morning has been shattered by the roar of gunfire and the screams of the wounded. For hours, you and your comrades perform a miracle. You hold, you bend, you fall back to another position, but you do not break. Buford is everywhere, riding the line, his calm presence a source of strength. He knows he is sacrificing his men, but he also knows it is for a cause greater than their own lives. Then, just as your lines are beginning to crumble under the immense pressure, you hear it, a cheer from behind you. Looking back, you see the dark blue lines of the Union First Corps, the sun glinting off thousands of bayonets, marching at the double quick onto the field. General Reynolds himself rides up to Buford. Relief washes over you, but it is fleeting. The skirmish is over. The battle for Gettysburg is about to begin in earnest. You feel a surge of raw, unadulterated hope. The arrival of the First Corps is like the cavalry in a motion picture, though you, of course, have no such reference. You see the legendary Iron Brigade, the toughest men in the Union Army, marching onto the field, distinctive in their black, hardy hats. Their reputation precedes them, and their presence alone seems to stiffen the spines of everyone around them. General John Reynolds, a man widely considered the most capable corps commander in the army, directs them into position personally. For a moment, it seems you will not only hold this ground, but you will win it. The Union forces crash into the Confederates with a renewed fury, pushing them back, capturing hundreds of prisoners in an old railroad cut. The momentum has shifted entirely. It is a feeling of pure exhilaration, the tide of battle turning right before your very eyes. And then, in an instant, it is all gone. A single bullet, a high-pitched whine that cuts through the din of battle, finds its mark. General Reynolds slumps from his horse, killed instantly. The death of a commander of his stature is more than just a tactical loss. It is a psychological blow that sends a shockwave through the Union line. It is like the brain of the operation has been removed. The command structure falters. Confusion begins to set in, but still, the men fight on with a desperate courage born from sheer grit. For hours, the battle west of town rages, a bloody stalemate where ground is taken, lost, and retaken yard by painful yard. But the real danger is not in front of you. It is coming from the north. As the battle unfolds, the Union 11th Corps arrives and is ordered by General Oliver O. Howard, now the senior commander on the field, to deploy on the flat, open plain north of town, extending the Union line to face a new threat. Historians still debate whether General Howard's placement of his 11th Corps was a catastrophic error that left their flank dangerously exposed. Suddenly, a new Confederate corps, under the command of General Richard Ewell, appears on the northern roads. They have marched down from the north at the sound of the guns, and they slam into the exposed right flank of the 11th Corps. It is the hammer blow that shatters the Union position. The 11th Corps, still smarting from a reputation for collapsing at Chancellorsville, is hit from the front and the side simultaneously. They break, and when one part of a battle line breaks, it creates a domino effect of pure, unadulterated panic. The collapse is not gradual, it is total and instantaneous. Now, you find yourself caught in the maelstrom. It is no longer a retreat, it is a rout. You are running for your life, not away from the enemy, but through the town of Gettysburg itself. The narrow streets, which seemed so quaint just hours before, become a human labyrinth of terror. Regiments are shattered into fragments. Men are separated from their officers, and the enemy is right behind you, firing into the disorganized mob. It's like trying to escape a burning theater through a single door. Amidst this chaos, one of the more remarkable and almost chivalrous stories of the war unfolds. A young Union general named Francis Barlow is severely wounded and left for dead on a small knoll. As Confederate troops sweep over the position, their commander, General John B. Gordon, finds the wounded Barlow, gives him water, and even offers to send a message to his wife behind Union lines, assuring her that he will be cared for. It's a moment of shared humanity in the middle of a slaughterhouse. But you see none of this. You only see the back of the man in front of you as you scramble through alleys and backyards, trying to reach the relative safety of Cemetery Hill. The high ground you can see rising to the south of town. And it is there, on that hill, that you find salvation. General Winfield Scott Hancock, sent ahead by Meade, has arrived. He is a force of nature, a magnificent presence on a horse, his voice cutting through the panic, rallying the broken units, directing them into a new defensive position. He turns chaos into order, and by the end of the day, a new, powerful Union line has formed. You were battered, beaten, and demoralized, but as you look out from your new position, you realize something. The Confederates have won the day, but you now hold the high ground. The very ground Buford had identified as the key. The line runs from Culp's Hill on your right, curves around Cemetery Hill in the center, and extends south along Cemetery Ridge. It looks, on a map, exactly like a fishhook, a position of immense defensive strength. The first day is over. Thousands are dead or wounded, and everyone knows the real battle is yet to come. As the sun sets on July 1st, a heavy silence falls over the fields, a silence made deeper and more profound by the day's deafening noise. You lie on the cool grass of Cemetery Hill, exhaustion a leaden weight in your bones. The air is thick with the smell of spent gunpowder and the metallic scent of blood, a smell you will never forget. Below you, in the growing darkness, you can see the campfires of the Confederate Army, thousands of them, twinkling like a fallen constellation. They encircled the town and your new position. You have survived, but the feeling is not one of victory. It's one of profound dread. You have been beaten badly, and you know they will come again in the morning. On the other side of those campfires, a conversation is taking place that will become one of the most intensely scrutinized moments of the entire war. Robert E. Lee rides forward to meet with his new Corps commander, Richard Ewell. Lee is not angry. His composure is legendary, but there is an unmistakable urgency in his voice. He looks up at the darkening slopes of Culp's Hill, the anchor of your Union right flank. He knows its value. He understands that if he can take that hill now, before the Union Army has fully concentrated and fortified its position, he can shatter their entire fishhook line. He turns to Ewell and says something that will be endlessly debated by historians for generations to come. He suggests that Ewell should take the hill, if practically. Those two words, if practicably, are the fulcrum upon which the fate of the battle, and perhaps the nation, now rests. What did Lee mean by them? With his former commander, Stonewall Jackson, an order like that would have been understood as a clear command to attack, a grant of permission to use his own aggressive judgment. Jackson would have almost certainly thrown his men forward without a second thought. But Ewell is not Jackson. He is a more cautious man, a good soldier, but not an intuitive genius. He is new to Corps command. He has just lost a leg in a previous battle and is still adjusting to a wooden prosthetic. He looks at the hill, formidable even in the fading light. He listens to reports from his subordinates. They tell him the Union position is strong. They tell him his men are disorganized and exhausted after a long day of marching and fighting. A psychological concept known as decision paralysis might explain what happened next. Faced with a high-stakes choice and incomplete information, Ewell hesitated. He weighed the risks, the potential glory of taking the hill versus the potential disaster of a failed night assault against a fortified position. The words, if practicable, gave him an out, a justification for caution. He was not directly disobeying an order. He was simply exercising the discretion his commander had given him. He decides it is not practicable. The attack does not happen. And as he makes this decision, you and thousands of other Union soldiers are digging in on that very hill. You are piling up rocks, felling trees to create breastworks, turning the natural strength of the position into a formidable fortress. Every minute of Ewell's hesitation is a minute you use to make your lines stronger. An eccentric curiosity of this moment is that one of Ewell's key subordinates, General Jubal Early, a fiery and aggressive officer, actually advised against the attack, a decision that seems strangely out of character for him. From a biblical perspective, You could see this as a moment of divine intervention, a subtle shifting of the scales, a moment where human frailty, indecision, and exhaustion altered the course of history. Had Ewell possessed the same ferocious, almost fanatical drive as Jackson, the story of Gettysburg might have been very different. The fishhook might have been broken before it was even fully formed, but he did not. And so, as darkness fully envelops the battlefield, you are given a gift you do not even know you have received, the gift of time. You sleep, if you can call it that, a fitful rest punctuated by the groans of the wounded from the town below and the nervous energy of what the dawn will bring. You don't know that a single moment of hesitation, a careful weighing of two small words, has given your army a fighting chance. You only know that you are alive, you are on high ground, and the enemy is coming. The fate that hung in the balance has been granted a reprieve, and will be decided by the blood and iron of the second day. You wake not to the sound of an alarm, but to the gentle prodding of a comrade and the damp chill of the pre-dawn air. The night was short, the sleep filled with phantoms. Around you, the army is slowly stirring to life. The sounds are muted, almost reverent. The clink of a tin cup, the low murmur of voices, the nervous coughs of men who know what this day holds. You can smell wood smoke, coffee, and the ever-present odor of nervous sweat. As the sun begins to climb, it reveals the full scale of what happened during the night. The Union Army has arrived, all of it, as far as you can see to your right and left. The ridges are now thick with blue uniforms, cannons, and supply wagons. The fishhook is no longer a skeleton crew of exhausted survivors. It is now a fortress of nearly 90,000 men, a coiled and waiting serpent of immense power. From your vantage point, the position feels impregnable. You feel a sense of security, of strength in numbers, that was utterly absent just 12 hours ago. Now, shift your perspective. Imagine you are standing 3/4 of a mile away, on the parallel rise of Seminary Ridge, beside General Robert E. Lee. He is looking through his field glasses at your position. He sees the same thing you see, the endless lines of blue, the bristling cannons. But he does not see an impregnable fortress. He sees an opportunity. His confidence, a trait that had served him so well, has not been shaken by the previous day's incomplete victory. He believes his men, his incomparable infantry, can accomplish anything. A simmering frustration lies just beneath his famously stoic exterior. He believes that if Ewell had only pushed forward last night, the battle would already be over. But that moment has passed. Today, a new plan is needed. This is a widely known historical fact. Lee's grand, ambitious plan for the second day. He intends to launch a massive, overwhelming assault on the Union left flank, the southern end of the fishhook line. He believes it is exposed and weakly defended. The attack will be led by his most trusted subordinate, his old warhorse, General James Longstreet. The plan is for Longstreet's entire corps to march south, unseen, and then swing east to roll up the Union line from its flank. Once that attack begins, the rest of the Confederate Army will join in. A series of coordinated assaults up the line, a tactic known as an en-echelon attack, like a wave crashing progressively down a beach. It is designed to prevent the Union from shifting reinforcements from one part of the line to another. The psychological pressure would be immense, as each Union commander would see the fight coming directly towards them, forcing them to keep their own troops in place. However, there is a problem. General Longstreet does not like the plan. He had spent the morning arguing for a different strategy entirely, a wide swinging movement to the south that would get between the Union Army in Washington, forcing Meade to attack them on ground of their own choosing. It's the classic clash between an aggressive, risk-taking commander and a more cautious, defensive-minded subordinate. Historians have long debated the source and impact of Longstreet's delay in launching the attack that morning. Was he being deliberately slow, a form of protest against a plan he deeply disagreed with, or was he simply being a methodical, careful commander? ensuring his troops were perfectly positioned before committing them to battle. This disagreement between Lee and his most senior general created a tense, strained atmosphere at Confederate headquarters, like a tense family dinner where no one is saying what they really mean. The attack, which Lee had wanted to begin early in the morning, is delayed for hours, and as the sun climbs higher, an obscure but vital drama is playing out. On a rocky wooded hill at the very end of your Union line, a place called Little Round Top, a small team from the Union Signal Corps has set up a station. With flags and telescopes, they watch Longstreet's columns, a river of grey and steel, as they begin their long, looping march. They frantically send messages, using a system of flag waving called wigwag, warning headquarters of the coming storm. The fate of the battle hangs on these delays, on these arguments, and on these frantic signals, all happening while you simply wait, cleaning your rifle under the increasingly hot July sun, completely unaware of the grand strategies and fatal arguments that are shaping your destiny. The sun is high now, a merciless white disk in a hazy sky. It is well past midday. You are a soldier in the Union Third Corps, and for most of the morning and afternoon, you have done nothing but wait. You sit on the low ground at the southern end of Cemetery Ridge, swatting at flies, the wool of your uniform a suffocating blanket. The waiting is its own form of torture, a slow cooking of the nerves. The silence is unnatural, filled with a tension you can feel in your teeth. You watch the heat shimmer off the fields in front of you. You know the enemy is out there, somewhere in those woods on Seminary Ridge, but for hours, nothing has happened. Your commander is a man named Daniel Sickles, and to understand what is about to happen, you must understand him. He is not like the other generals. He is not a career soldier, a graduate of West Point. He is a political creature, a product of the rough-and-tumble world of New York's Tammany Hall. Think of a charismatic, ambitious, and slightly scandalous politician in a general's uniform. Dan Sickles is a man who makes his own rules. This is not a metaphor. Years before the war, he had become infamous for a very public, very shocking act. After discovering his young wife was having an affair with Philip Barton Key, the son of the man who wrote the Star-Spangled Banner, Sickles confronted and shot Key dead in broad daylight, right across from the White House. At his trial, his high-powered lawyer employed a novel defense, the first successful use of temporary insanity in American history. Sickles was acquitted. This is the man in command of your life today, a man with a proven history of taking audacious, impulsive action and a belief that he is above the rules that govern other men. He looks at his assigned position on this low ground, partially overlooked by the higher terrain of the Gettysburg road a half-mile in front of him, and he does not like it. It is not a good place for a fight. More importantly, perhaps, it is not a prominent place for a man who craves the spotlight. So, he makes a decision that will be born of his own volition, without orders, and in direct violation of the Army's defensive plan. He decides to move his entire corps of over 10,000 men forward, off the ridge, and occupy what he perceives to be the better ground along the Gettysburg Road. You don't know the strategic implications. You are just a soldier. You are simply given the order to get up, form ranks, and march. And so you do. Your entire corps begins to move, a river of blue flowing out from the main Union line, creating a huge, exposed bulge, or salient. You march across the fields and take up new positions in a peach orchard, along the road, and among a bizarre jumble of massive boulders known locally as the Devil's Den. It feels strange, exposed. You can see the main Union line far behind you now. You are an island. Meanwhile, General Meade, the Army commander, is becoming increasingly concerned. He hasn't heard from his Third Corps for hours. He sends a staff officer, and then finally rides out himself to see what is going on. What he finds leaves him apoplectic. He finds Sickles' entire corps a mile in front of where it is supposed to be, completely disconnected from the rest of the army, just as Longstreet's massive Confederate assault is beginning to crash into its flank. The first shells are already starting to fall. The conversation between them is the stuff of legend. Meade, barely controlling his famous temper, tells Sickles he is too far advanced. Sickles, ever the showman, offers to withdraw. But as the roar of the Confederate attack grows louder, Meade knows it is too late. The battle will have to be fought here, on ground chosen not by the army commander, but by the impulsive will of a single, defiant subordinate. Historians still debate the true impact of this move. Was it an act of catastrophic ego that nearly lost the battle, or did his unauthorized advance inadvertently disrupt the timing and coordination of Lee's grand assault, forcing the Confederates to fight in places they hadn't intended to? For you, standing in that peach orchard, the academic debate means nothing. All you know is that the woods in front of you are suddenly alive with the flash of sunlight on steel, and a terrifying guttural scream, the rebel yell, is about to wash over you. The world explodes. It is not a single sound, but a symphony of violence that assaults your senses from all directions. The Confederate yell, a high, haunting shriek, rises from the woods in front of you, a sound designed to freeze the blood, to bypass the rational brain and tap directly into primal fear. Then comes the roar of thousands of rifles firing at once, a deafening, continuous crackle like a forest fire consuming the world. You are in the Devil's Den, a truly hellish landscape of giants' prehistoric boulders jumbled together as if thrown there by an angry god. There is no neat battle line here. It is a desperate, scrambling fight for survival among the rocks. Bullets whine past your head like angry hornets, and the air is filled with the sharp, metallic clang of lead striking stone, sending splinters of rock and lead spattering in all directions. The smoke is so thick you can barely see the man next to you. It chokes you, stings your eyes, and shrouds everything in a grey, ghostly fog. This is what psychologists call sensory overload. Your brain simply cannot process the sheer volume of information flooding into it. The noise, the smoke, the screams, the sight of men falling around you. Time itself seems to warp, moments stretching into eternities, while minutes disappear in a blink. You load and fire your rifle mechanically, your actions driven by instinct and endless drilling, not conscious thought. A short distance away, a deceptively peaceful field of golden wheat is becoming something else entirely. The wheat field, as it will forever be known, becomes the vortex of the second day's battle. It is a tactical nightmare, a shallow bowl of land surrounded by higher ground on three sides. And into this bowl, both armies pour their men. The fighting is not a clean, linear affair. It is a chaotic, swirling meat grinder. This piece of ground would become infamous, as the wheat field changed hands no less than 6 times over the course of just a few hours. You see regiments charge into the wheat, their blue uniforms and bright flags clear for a moment against the gold, only to be swallowed by the smoke and chaos. Then, a few minutes later, a ragged line of grey and butternut emerges from the other side, only to be met by a fresh wave of Union troops crashing into them. Bayonets are used with brutal intimacy, rifles are swung like clubs. It is a desperate, swirling brawl where all grand strategy has dissolved into 1,000 tiny, personal struggles for a few square feet of trampled earth. Amidst the chaos of the Devil's Den, an obscure and haunting story will later emerge. After the battle, a photographer named Alexander Gardner will take one of the most famous images of the war, home of a rebel sharpshooter, showing a dead Confederate soldier lying in a crevice between the rocks. For a century, it was seen as a raw, candid depiction of the lonely death of a sniper. Decades later, however, analysis of other photos revealed the truth. Gardner and his team had found a body elsewhere on the battlefield and had dragged it nearly 70 yards to this more dramatic location, even propping the soldier's head up and placing a rifle beside him to create the perfect, tragic composition. It's a stark reminder that even our understanding of history is shaped and sometimes manipulated. Some historians still argue that Sickles' folly, in a strange twist of fate, may have inadvertently saved the army by drawing Longstreet's perfectly planned assault into this chaotic, attritional fight that bled the Confederates of men and cohesion. Instead of a clean, sweeping flank attack, they were sucked into a bloody morass, not of their choosing. But you don't know any of this. All you know is that your core is being systematically destroyed. The line is not bending, it is shattering. The peach orchard has fallen. The wheat field is a sea of blood. The Devil's Den is being overrun. The entire Union left flank, the anchor of Meade's army, is collapsing in on itself. And just beyond the chaos, one small, rocky hill remains undefended. The key to the entire Union position, Little Round Top. From the chaos below, your eyes are drawn upward. To your left, a steep, rocky hill rises above the battlefield, its summit seemingly bare. This is Little Round Top, and in the unfolding disaster of the Third Corps' collapse, it has become the most important piece of real estate in North America. It is the anchor of the Union line, and it is almost completely undefended. On its summit, you see a lone figure, General Governor K. Warren, the Army's chief engineer. He is there by chance, surveying the unfolding disaster, when he sees something that makes his blood run cold. A flicker of sunlight reflecting off steel in the woods on the far side of the hill. It's the glint of thousands of bayonets. A massive Confederate force is moving, unseen, to take this vital high ground. In a moment of pure, panicked genius, he sends his aides scrambling down the slopes, with orders to grab any Union troops they can find and get them onto that hill. Now, one of those frantic aides finds Colonel Strong Vincent, a brigade commander. Without waiting for official orders from his divisional commander, Vincent recognizes the mortal danger. He immediately diverts his entire brigade for regiments and begins a desperate race to the summit of Little Round Top, arriving just moments before the first wave of Confederates. You are a soldier in one of those regiments, the 20th Maine. Your colonel is a man named Joshua Chamberlain. Like Sickles, he is not a professional soldier. Before the war, he was a professor of rhetoric and modern languages at Bowdoin College in Maine. A quiet academic man now tasked with holding the absolute end of the entire Union line. Your regiment is placed on the rocky, wooded, southern slope of the hill. Colonel Vincent's final orders to Chamberlain are simple and stark. Hold this ground at all costs. There is no one to your left. You are it. If you retreat, the entire Confederate Army will pour into the Union rear, and the battle, and likely the war, will be lost. Then they come. Men from Alabama, as tough and determined as any soldiers on the continent, crashing up the slope. The fighting is savage, intimate, and relentless. You take cover behind rocks and trees, firing down into the advancing lines. They fall back, regroup, and come again and again. For over an hour, you are locked in this desperate struggle. The air is so thick with smoke you can barely breathe. Your comrades fall around you. Your rifle barrel is almost too hot to touch. Your shoulder aches from the recoil. And worst of all, you are running out of ammunition. You are down to your last few rounds. The men are taking cartridges from the dead and wounded. The line is thinning, wavering under the immense pressure. The Alabamians are beginning to flank you to get around your left side. You can feel the position about to collapse. And this is where an obscure but remarkable fact adds another layer to Chamberlain's legend. Among your ranks are about 120 men from the old 2nd Maine Regiment. Men who had been labeled mutineers for refusing to fight after their enlistments had expired. They had been sent to Chamberlain with orders that he could shoot them if they continued to refuse duty. Instead of threatening them, Chamberlain had given them a quiet, reasoned speech, appealing to their honor and patriotism. Nearly all of them had taken up rifles and joined your ranks. Now, these same men are fighting with desperate courage on this forgotten slope. Historians still debate whether Chamberlain's famous order was a spontaneous stroke of genius or a pre-planned contingency for running out of ammunition. In that moment of supreme crisis, with no ammunition and his line about to be overrun, Chamberlain makes a decision that defies all conventional military logic. He cannot retreat. He cannot stay. The only option left is to attack. He gives the order, bayonet. The command is passed down the line. You hear the metallic rasp of hundreds of bayonets being fixed to rifles. Then, with a roar, the line rises as one. Chamberlain orders the left of his line, which had been bent back, to swing forward like a great gate. The maneuver is a right wheel forward, a complex parade ground drill executed under the most intense fire imaginable. You are screaming as you run, a wild, primal sound of desperation and fury, charging not up the hill, but down it. The psychological shock to the Confederates is total. They had been on the verge of victory, expecting the Union line to break and run at any moment. Instead, this ragged line of blue is now charging at them with cold steel. They are exhausted, confused, and terrified. They break, they throw down their weapons, and surrender by the hundreds. In one of the most dramatic and consequential moments of the war, a college professor and a few hundred men from Maine have saved the entire Union Army. But the day's bleeding was not over. Far to the right, on the other end of the fishhook, another desperate fight was reaching its own bloody climax. While all eyes, both then and throughout history, were focused on the dramatic slaughter on the Union left, a separate, equally vicious battle was raging on the opposite end of the line. Your perspective shifts. You are now a Union soldier on Culp's Hill, the barb of the fishhook, the anchor of the Army's right flank. This hill is not like Little Round Top. It is not a small, rocky knob, but a larger, heavily wooded mountain. It slopes a tangle of trees, undergrowth, and massive boulders. Since the night before, you have been working relentlessly, turning this natural fortress into a man-made one. You have chopped down trees, piled up logs, and dug trenches, creating a formidable line of breastworks. You feel a sense of rugged security here. The position is strong, and you have had time to make it stronger. The psychology of a fortified position is powerful. It gives you a sense of control, a feeling that you are not just a target, but a hunter waiting in a well-prepared blind. Earlier in the day, a decision was made at Union headquarters that nearly proved fatal. As the crisis on the left flank escalated with the collapse of Sickles's corps, General Meade, desperate for reinforcements, ordered the entire 12th Corps, your corps, to abandon Culp's Hill and march to the other side of the battlefield. It was a calculated risk of immense proportions, a classic military dilemma known as robbing Peter to pay Paul. You are told to pack up and move out, leaving only a single brigade under General George S. Greene to hold this miles-long stretch of vital high ground. You do not know the reason, you just follow the orders. A strange feeling of unease settling in your gut as you abandon the fortifications you had worked so hard to build. Greene, a 62-year-old civil engineer and one of the oldest generals in the Army, is left with a mere 1,400 men to defend a position that had been held by nearly 9,000. He is a forgotten hero of this battle, his quick thinking and engineering skills proving just as crucial as Chamberlain's bravery. He immediately has his men thin their line, stretching it out to cover as much of the abandoned works as possible. As dusk begins to settle, turning the woods into a landscape of deep, ominous shadows, the attack finally comes. Remember General Ewell, the Confederate commander who had hesitated to attack this very hill the night before. Now, prodded by Lee's orders for a simultaneous demonstration to support Longstreet's main assault, he finally sends his men forward. They crash into the thinly held Union line. The fighting on Culp's Hill is a different kind of hell from the open field slaughter in the wheat field. Here, it is a confused, terrifying fight in near darkness. Muzzle flashes from the rifles are the only source of light, brief, blinding strobes that illuminate nightmarish scenes of combat. You fire blindly into the darkness at the sound of cracking twigs or a shadowy movement. The attackers, men from Maryland and Virginia managed to overrun a section of the lower, abandoned breastworks. For a moment, they hold a foothold on this critical hill. An eccentric curiosity of this part of the battle is the story of artilleryman's luck. As the Confederates pushed up the hill, a single Union cannon, left behind in the rush, was being served by a small, isolated crew. Just as they were about to be overrun, they fired a final canister round, a giant shotgun blast of metal balls, that tore a hole in the attacking line at point-blank range, buying a few precious seconds for infantry support to arrive. The sound of the fighting is a continuous, deafening roar that echoes across the battlefield. Hearing the eruption of battle on the right flank, you and the rest of the 12th Corps, who had been marching toward the other end of the line, are ordered to turn around and race back to Culp's Hill. You arrive to find a desperate struggle underway, your comrades holding on by a thread. The battle rages late into the night, a brutal close-quarters slugfest in the dark woods. By the time the firing finally dies down around midnight, the situation is a tense stalemate. You have managed to reclaim most of your original line, but the Confederates still hold the trenches on the lower slope. As you try to rest, you can hear them, just yards away in the darkness, digging in, preparing for the morning. The second day of Gettysburg is over. It has been the bloodiest single day of the battle, a day of catastrophic blunders, unbelievable heroism, and incomprehensible slaughter. And as both armies lick their wounds under a sliver of moon, the commanders gather to decide what comes next. The night is a black, velvet curtain, torn in places by the flickering lights of field hospitals and the distant glow of campfires. The air, finally cooling, carries the sounds of the wounded, a constant, heartbreaking chorus of human suffering. In the center of the Union line, near a small, unassuming farmhouse belonging to a widow named Lydia Leicester, General Meade has summoned his corps commanders. You are an aide, standing just outside the door, close enough to feel the gravity of the moment. The room is tiny, cramped, and filled with exhausted men. The air is thick with the smell of sweat, damp wool, and cigar smoke. There is no grand table, just a few crates and a simple plank. This is the nerve center of a nation's defense. Meade, a man who has been in command for less than a week, sits at the head of this makeshift table. He is not a charismatic leader who inspires with soaring rhetoric. He is an engineer, methodical, precise, and a little prickly. He doesn't ask them what they want to do. He conducts the meeting like a formal inquest, a process that reflects his logical, almost scientific mind. He poses 3 questions to each general in turn. Should the army remain in its present position, or should it retreat? If it remains, should it attack or await the enemy's attack? If it awaits attack, how long should it wait? One by one, the generals, men who have seen their commands shredded in the peach orchard and the wheat field, give their answers. The vote is unanimous. Stay, await the attack. There is no bravado here, no boastful confidence, just a quiet, grim resolve. A psychological turning point has been reached. The Army of the Potomac, so often beaten, so often let down by its commanders, has decided to stand its ground. They have absorbed the most ferocious blows the legendary Army of Northern Virginia could deliver, and they are still here. There is a sense of shared purpose, of belonging to something that will not break, that is forged in that tiny, smoky room. Now, travel across the valley to the Confederate headquarters on Seminary Ridge. The atmosphere here is different. There is the same exhaustion, but it is laced with a bitter tang of frustration. Lee's command is not a council of equals. It is the will of one man, and that man's will is fixed. James Longstreet, his old warhorse, argues with him again, his voice low and earnest. He pleads with Lee to abandon the frontal assaults. He urges him, once more, to swing the army south, to find good defensive ground, and to force Meade to attack them. It is a sound, logical military argument, but Lee will not hear it. He has come to believe that the Union flanks are too strong now. He has seen his men come so close to victory on both the left and the right. He believes the Union Army has been forced to weaken its center to reinforce its flanks. He points towards the center of your Union line, towards Cemetery Ridge. That, he decides, is where the final, decisive blow will fall. Historians still passionately debate this moment. Was Lee's decision a product of overconfidence? A stubborn refusal to admit that his enemy was not on the verge of breaking? Or was it a calculated risk based on his assessment of the battlefield? Some argue that his fighting spirit, his blood was up, and he had become psychologically committed to winning the battle right here, right now, on this ground. An obscure but telling detail of this night was the long-awaited arrival of J.E.B. Stuart and his cavalry. After being out of touch for over a week, a period during which Lee was effectively blind, Stuart finally rode into camp. The reunion was not a joyous one. Lee, in a rare display of controlled anger, is reported to have said to his flamboyant cavalry chief, "Well, General Stuart, you are here at last." The unspoken rebuke hung heavy in the air. The command friction was palpable, while Meade's subordinates were solidifying their support for his defensive plan. Lee's most senior subordinate was deeply, fundamentally opposed to his commander's offensive one. The contrast is stark. One camp, a collective agreement to endure; the other, a singular, unshakable vision for one last, glorious charge. As the commanders finally depart to get what little rest they can, the decision is made. Thousands of men will be asked to cross a mile of open ground tomorrow to attack the strongest part of the Union line. The final, terrible act of the play has been written. The dawn of July 3rd breaks clear and beautiful, a cruel mockery of the scene it illuminates. You are on Culp's Hill, and you did not sleep. You spent the night listening to the sounds of the enemy, just a stone's throw away in the darkness, as they dug into the trenches they had captured from your comrades. The air is deceptively cool, and for a moment, if you tune out the constant low hum of the wounded, you could almost imagine this was just another summer morning. Birds are singing in the shattered trees, but you know better. There is a feeling of grim finality in the air, a sense that today, one way or another, this will end. Before the sun has even fully crested the horizon, the Union command makes its decision. These captured trenches cannot be allowed to remain in enemy hands. They represent a dagger aimed at the heart of the Army's supply line and rear. Suddenly, without warning, the morning's quiet is annihilated. A wave of sound washes over you, a physical force that vibrates in your chest. The Union artillery, massed on Powers Hill behind you, opens fire on the Confederate positions in the woods. The roar is continuous, a rolling thunder that shakes the very ground you stand on. Trees splinter and crash down. The air is filled with flying debris and the high-pitched shriek of shells. This is the overture. Then comes your part. You and the rest of the 12th Corps are ordered to attack, to reclaim the ground you had abandoned the day before. You surge forward, screaming, into the smoke-choked woods. The fighting is some of the most savage of the war. It is a point-blank, brutal affair fought over the log breastworks. Rifles are shoved through gaps in the logs and fired blindly. Men stab at each other with bayonets over the top of the fortifications. It is a 7-hour battle of attrition, a relentless, grinding struggle that consumes men and ammunition at a terrifying rate. By late morning, it is over. The Confederates, having thrown everything they have at the hill, are finally driven back. You stand, exhausted, sweat-soaked, and powder-stained, back in the same trenches you had dug 2 days ago. Culp's Hill is secure. The Union right flank is no longer in danger. As the firing on your end of the line finally sputters and dies out, a strange, almost unnatural calm settles over the entire battlefield. An eerie silence descends around 11 a.m. and stretches into the early afternoon. You sit behind your defenses, cleaning your rifle, refilling your cartridge box, and waiting. The tension is worse than the noise. You watch the heat haze dance over the fields. You look across the valley, a mile of open, gently rolling ground, to the woods on Seminary Ridge. You can see movement over there, the shifting of large bodies of troops, the glint of the sun on cannon barrels being wheeled into place. Something is coming. Everyone knows it. Over on that ridge, General Lee is watching too. The failure of the attack on Culp's Hill has not changed his mind. It has only reinforced his belief. The Union flanks have proven too strong. Therefore, their center must be weak. He turns to a reluctant General Longstreet and gives the final orders for the grand assault. It will be led by a fresh division, the men of General George Pickett. They will be supported by 2 other divisions, now badly depleted from the first 2 days' fighting. In total, some 12,500 men will be asked to cross that open ground and strike the Union center. The target is a small, unremarkable clump of trees on Cemetery Ridge. An obscure but heart-wrenching detail personalizes this grand, terrible plan. One of Pickett's brigadiers, Lewis Armistead, was a dear friend of the Union general defending that very part of the line, Winfield Scott Hancock. Before the war, at a farewell party, as they all went their separate ways to join opposing armies, Armistead had tearfully told Hancock that he would raise his hand against him, but never his heart. Now, fate was sending him on a direct collision course with his old friend. Historians still debate whether Lee's final gambit was an act of supreme faith in his men, or a desperate, almost reckless roll of the dice, born from the frustration of being so close to victory. You, sitting behind a low stone wall on Cemetery Ridge, do not have the luxury of such debates. You only know the silence is stretching on for too long. And then, at precisely 1:07 p.m., you see a puff of smoke from the woods opposite you, followed a second later by the boom of a cannon. Then another, and another. The world dissolves into pure, concussive sound. It is not a battle, it is a cataclysm. From the woods along Seminary Ridge, more than 150 Confederate cannons erupt in a single, coordinated blast. The ground beneath you shudders, as if in the grip of an earthquake. The air itself seems to tear apart, filled with the screaming, demonic whistle of incoming shells. This is the Great Cannonade, the largest artillery barrage ever witnessed on the American continent. It is Lee's overture to the final assault, a sledgehammer blow designed to achieve 2 things. First, to physically destroy the Union artillery batteries on Cemetery Ridge, clearing the way for his infantry. And second, to psychologically shatter you, the Union infantrymen cowering behind your low stone wall. It is a form of shock and awe, a deliberate attempt to induce terror and paralysis, to break your will before the first Confederate soldier even steps out of the woods. You press your face into the dirt, making yourself as small as you can possibly be. The noise is a physical weight, pressing down on you, vibrating through your bones. It's a sound so immense it transcends hearing. You simply feel it, an endless, deafening roar. Shells explode all around you. The air is filled with a storm of flying metal, jagged pieces of iron that scythe through the air with a terrifying hum. You see a caisson, an ammunition chest for a nearby cannon, take a direct hit. It disappears in a blinding flash and a mushroom cloud of black smoke. The explosion so powerful, it lifts men off their feet. Horses scream, a sound of pure animal terror that is somehow more piercing than the cannons. The smoke is so thick that the sun is blotted out, turning the bright afternoon into a hellish, sulphurous twilight. You can't see anything, you can only hear and feel the destruction. It is the ultimate test of human endurance. Over on the Confederate side, the experience is just as terrifying. The Union artillery, under the masterful command of General Henry Hunt, answers with a fury of its own. Nearly 100 Union guns are concentrated on the Confederate lines, turning the woods of Seminary Ridge into a splintered, smoking ruin. The Confederate gunners, exposed and working their cannons feverishly, are suffering horrific casualties. An eccentric but telling curiosity of the barrage was its general ineffectiveness. Despite the terrifying noise and smoke, most of the Confederate shells, fired at an upward angle to clear the ridge, were fused improperly. They sailed harmlessly over your head, landing far in the rear, creating chaos among the supply wagons and field hospitals, but leaving the frontline infantry relatively unscathed. The psychological effect, however, was immense. For nearly 2 hours, this titanic duel of iron and fire rages. It is the loudest man-made sound anyone here has ever heard. Then, a brilliant piece of psychological warfare unfolds on the Union side. General Hunt, realizing his long-range ammunition is running low and wanting to lure the Confederate infantry into the open, gives the order for his cannons to gradually cease firing, one by one, then in groups. The Union guns fall silent. To the Confederates watching from across the valley, it seems their barrage has succeeded. They believe they have smashed the Union artillery, that the enemy is broken and demoralized. A cheer goes up from their lines. It is the signal they have been waiting for. They have been deceived by a deliberate, calculated silence. Longstreet, who had opposed this charge from the beginning, is so distraught he cannot bring himself to give the verbal order to advance. He simply nods his head when Pickett asks for permission to go. The Confederate artillery now falls silent, and into this sudden, ringing void, a new sound emerges. The sound of officers shouting commands, of thousands of men moving into formation. You cautiously lift your head from the dirt. The smoke begins to clear, and what you see takes your breath away. You push yourself up on your elbows, the ringing in your ears slowly subsiding into a low hum. The smoke, thick and acrid, begins to drift away on a light breeze, and through the thinning haze, you see it. It is one of the most magnificent and terrifying sights in the history of human conflict. Emerging from the woods of Seminary Ridge, stretching for nearly a mile from left to right, is a line of battle that seems to have no end. It is not a charge, not yet. It is a parade. 3 divisions of Confederate infantry, 12,500 men, are moving toward you as if on a review field. Their lines are perfectly dressed, their regimental flags, the red Southern Cross, snapping proudly in the breeze. The afternoon sun glints off a seemingly endless forest of rifle barrels and bayonets. Officers on horseback calmly ride in front of their men, their swords drawn and resting on their shoulders. It is beautiful, and it is utterly insane. Your breath catches in your throat. This is not the wild, screaming rush you have experienced in other battles. This is a deliberate, almost serene advance. You can see the commanders. General George Pickett is there, his long, perfumed hair flowing, a picture of romantic chivalry. On his left are the divisions of General Pettigrew and General Trimble, men whose commands had already been savaged in the first day's fighting, now being asked to do the impossible. And there, leading a brigade in the center, you can see a figure who will become an icon of this moment. Brigadier General Lewis Armistead places his black felt hat on the tip of his upraised sword, creating a beacon for his men to follow into the storm. It is a gesture of profound defiance and fatalistic courage. This single, striking image captures the very essence of the charge. For a few long moments, they march in almost complete silence, the only sound the rhythmic tramp of thousands of boots and the gentle flutter of their flags. They cross the low ground. They climb the fences along the Emmitsburg Road, pausing to realign their ranks with a discipline that seems superhuman. You watch, mesmerized, a feeling of cold dread mixed with a strange, professional admiration. What you are witnessing is the physical embodiment of an idea, the Southern ideal of honor and valor made manifest in a line of men walking calmly toward their own annihilation. Historians will forever debate Lee's state of mind. Was this the desperate act of a cornered gambler, or was it the ultimate expression of his unwavering faith in the invincibility of his men? From your perspective, it feels like watching a tidal wave of gray and steel, a force of nature that cannot be stopped. Then, your artillery opens up. The trap is sprung. The guns that had fallen silent were not destroyed, they were waiting. From your right, on Cemetery Hill, and from your left, on Little Round Top, the Union cannons begin to fire, not at the Confederate guns, but at their infantry. The shells plow into the perfectly formed lines, creating horrifying gaps where men simply cease to exist. You see a solid shot, a black cannonball, skip along the ground like a stone on water, tearing through a dozen men before it loses its momentum. You see shells explode in the air, raining down a deadly shower of shrapnel. The beautiful, perfect lines begin to fray. They waver, but they do not break. The gaps are filled, the lines dress themselves, and they keep coming. Now your own infantry commanders are walking the line behind you, their voices calm and steady. "Steady, boys," they say. "Don't fire until they reach that fence. Aim low." You rest your rifle on the low stone wall, your knuckles white. They are closer now. You can start to see their faces. The grand, terrible spectacle is about to become a personal, intimate act of killing. The mile of open ground is almost crossed. The command rips down the line, not a shout, but a sharp, clear order passed from officer to officer. Fire. You don't even think. You aim your rifle at the center of the approaching mass and squeeze the trigger. Your rifle leaps against your shoulder, and you are momentarily blinded by the flash and the billow of white smoke from the muzzle. An instant later, the rifles of the 1,000 men standing beside you go off in a single, crashing volley. It is not a crackle, it is a physical roar. A solid wall of sound and lead that smashes into the front rank of the advancing Confederates. The effect is instantaneous and horrific. The beautiful, orderly line dissolves. Men are spun around, thrown backward, or simply collapse in heaps. Flags, those precious symbols of pride and defiance, tumble to the ground. The first wave of the charge is not just stopped, it is erased. You frantically reload, your hands moving with the muscle memory of 1,000 drills. Ram the cartridge, prime the weapon, aim, fire. The world narrows to this single, brutal task, but they keep coming. It seems impossible, an act against the very laws of nature, but a determined core of men, now a disorganized mob rather than a perfect line, continues to surge forward through the smoke and the bodies of their fallen comrades. They are screaming now, the high, terrifying rebel yell, a sound of pure, feral rage. They reach the low stone wall, and for a few desperate, terrible minutes, the battle becomes a furious, intimate brawl. Men are stabbing over the wall with bayonets, swinging their rifles like clubs, even throwing rocks. It is a swirling maelstrom of blue and grey, a human storm where all order has vanished, replaced by the primal will to live. And at the very tip of this storm is General Lewis Armistead, his hat still perched on his sword. He leads a small group of perhaps 150 men over the wall at a slight bend, a place that will forever be known as the Angle. He places his hand on a Union cannon. For one brief, heart-stopping moment, the Confederate battle flag is planted on Cemetery Ridge. This is it, the high watermark of the rebellion, the closest the Confederacy will ever come to victory. But the breach is a tiny island in a vast blue sea. An obscure but critical moment of human drama unfolds right here. The Union regiment directly in front of Armistead's breakthrough, the 72nd Pennsylvania, is momentarily stunned. The men lying down behind the wall, instead of countercharging, their officers frantically try to get them to their feet, striking at them with the flats of their swords, screaming at them to advance. Then, from all sides, Union reinforcements converge on this single point. Regiments that had been held in reserve now charge into the fray, their lines solid, their bayonets leveled. The small group of Confederates is swarmed, overwhelmed by sheer numbers. General Armistead goes down, mortally wounded, near the cannon he had briefly captured. His friend, the Union General Hancock, who had been directing the defense from horseback, is also struck down by a severe wound just moments later. Historians continue to debate the precise number of Confederates who crossed the wall and for how many fleeting seconds or minutes they held their precarious foothold. The psychological turning point is absolute. The Confederate surge, which had seemed so unstoppable, simply dissolves. The survivors, those who are not killed or captured, now realize their position is hopeless. Their support has vanished, their leaders are down, and they are 100 men surrounded by thousands. They throw down their weapons in surrender or turn and begin the long, lonely walk back across the open field. There is no panic, just a slow, dazed, funereal retreat. The great charge has failed. The grand spectacle has ended in a bloody, intimate repulse. You stand up from behind the wall, your ears ringing, your face black with powder. The firing sputters and dies down, replaced by the awful sound of thousands of wounded men crying out in the field before you. You have held. The line did not break. You feel not triumph, but a profound, bone-deep exhaustion and a hollow sense of relief. You have survived the breaking of the wave. You stand behind the wall, watching the last, ragged remnants of the charge recede back across the field of slaughter. The air, which moments ago was a solid wall of sound, is now filled with a different noise, a vast and terrible symphony of human pain. The cries and groans of thousands of wounded men, both blue and grey, drift up from the field, a sound that will haunt the dreams of everyone who hears it. As the smoke clears entirely, your perspective shifts again. You are now across the valley, on Seminary Ridge, watching this river of broken humanity flow back towards you. It is not a rout. Men are not throwing down their weapons and running in panic. It is something far more heartbreaking. It is a funeral procession. The men walk slowly, their heads bowed, their shoulders slumped in a posture of utter defeat. They are dazed, bloody, and empty-handed, having left their comrades, their flags, and their invincibility behind on that fatal ridge. And then, a single figure on a grey horse rides out to meet them. It is Robert E. Lee. His face, usually a mask of calm, dignified command, is etched with a grief so profound it seems to age him before your very eyes. He rides among the shattered remnants of his finest divisions, not as a general, but as a father who has just led his sons to ruin. And he begins to speak, his voice clear and steady, yet filled with an unmistakable anguish. To one group, he says, "All this has been my fault." To another, "It is I who have lost this fight." This is the widely known, almost legendary, moment of the battle's aftermath. In this moment of catastrophic failure, Lee does not blame his subordinates. He does not blame the enemy's strength or the fortunes of war. He absorbs the failure completely, personally. "This is all my fault," he repeats, over and over. This is a masterclass in leadership psychology, even if it was born of pure, honest grief. By taking the full weight of the blame upon himself, he performed a kind of psychological alchemy. He took the shame and humiliation that was settling on his men and placed it squarely on his own shoulders. He validated their sacrifice, telling them they had done all that men could do, and that the failure was his, and his alone. It was this act, more than any other, that prevented the Army of Northern Virginia from dissolving into a demoralized mob. He gave their defeat a meaning, a single point of failure they could rally against, and in doing so, he saved his army. Yet not everyone was so easily consoled. General Pickett, his magnificent division now, a ghost of its former self, rides up, his face a mask of fury and grief. When Lee instructs him to rally his division to prepare for a possible Union counterattack, Pickett's reply is laced with a bitterness that he would carry for the rest of his life. "General Lee," he says, "I have no division." Historians still debate Lee's emotional state at this moment. Was his incredible composure a testament to his legendary self-control, or was he in a state of profound shock, a man detached from the sheer scale of the disaster he had just unleashed? From a distance, it looks like the former, a leader holding his army together through sheer force of will. Up close, you can see the tremor in his hands, the profound sorrow in his eyes. His acceptance of blame is almost biblical in its simplicity and power. A leader standing before his people and confessing a great sin. He now fully expects the counterblow to fall. He has thrown his best troops against the Union center and had them shattered. His own lines are disorganized. His artillery is low on ammunition. If Meade were to launch a coordinated assault now, the Army of Northern Virginia would likely cease to exist. Lee begins frantically trying to patch together a defensive line, pulling together stragglers and artillery batteries, his mind already shifting from the failed attack to the desperate defense. But the attack never comes. The Union Army, itself exhausted and battered, is content to hold the ground it has paid for so dearly. As the sun begins to set on the third day, Lee realizes he has not only lost the battle, he has lost the campaign. The only thing left to do now is to save what is left of his army. The night of July 3rd gives way to the 4th, a day that should be filled with celebration, but is instead shrouded in a somber, weeping sky. A torrential rain begins to fall, a cold, miserable downpour that seems to wash the blood from the grass, but does little to cleanse the horror from the air. You are now a part of the Confederate retreat. The grand invasion of the North is over. All the hopes and dreams of a war-ending victory have dissolved into this one desperate goal: to get back across the Potomac River, back to the relative safety of Virginia. The army is not a routed mob. Its discipline holds, but the swagger is gone, replaced by a grim, dogged determination. The most haunting part of this retreat is not the column of soldiers, but the wagon train that accompanies it. It is a spectacle of pure, unadulterated misery. Stretching for 17 miles, a slow-moving serpent of suffering, is the train of the wounded. Thousands of men, maimed in the peach orchard, the wheat field, and on the slopes of Cemetery Ridge, are packed into rough, springless farm wagons. With every jolt and rut in the muddy road, a fresh wave of agony washes over them. You can hear it from a mile away, a constant, rolling groan of human suffering, punctuated by the sharp screams of men whose shattered limbs are jostled beyond endurance. The rain soaks their blankets, chills them to the bone, and turns the roads into a quagmire of thick, clinging mud. There are no painkillers, no real medical care, just the slow, torturous journey south. It is a vision of hell on earth, a river of pain flowing away from the field of broken dreams. Leading this ghastly procession is General John Imberden, a cavalry commander tasked with the monumental challenge of escorting this train to safety. He would later write of the experience, describing the sound as the most heartbreaking he had ever heard, a noise that haunted him for the rest of his life. Protecting this vulnerable train is paramount. Lee's army forms a vast moving shield around it, the infantry marching on the flanks, the cavalry fighting a constant, stinging series of rearguard actions against the Union horsemen who harry and snap at the column like wolves. You are one of these cavalrymen. Your days and nights are a blur of exhaustion. You fight a skirmish, fall back, catch an hour of sleep in a wet saddle, and then fight again. You are living on raw nerves and black coffee. The rain is your constant companion, turning your uniform into a sodden, heavy weight and the ground into a slippery, treacherous trap. The retreat is a logistical nightmare. The roads are choked, the rivers are rising due to the relentless rain, and the enemy is nipping at your heels. The Potomac River, your finish line, is swollen and impassable. The pontoon bridges the army had used to cross have been destroyed by a Union raid. For a terrifying period, the entire army of Northern Virginia is trapped. Its back to an uncrossable river, its ammunition low, and the victorious Union army slowly closing in. This was the moment, the golden opportunity for General Meade to deliver the final, crushing blow, to destroy Lee's army once and for all and end the war. A fascinating but often overlooked aspect of the retreat is the sheer volume of plunder the Confederates were trying to take with them. The wagon train was not just filled with wounded, but also with thousands of cattle, sheep, and hogs, and immense quantities of flour, sugar, and other supplies seized from the Pennsylvania countryside. The retreat was a flight for survival, but it was also a massive, slow-moving heist, Historians still debate whether Meade's caution during this period was prudent military leadership or a catastrophic failure of nerve. He was a new commander, his own army was badly battered, and he was wary of attacking Lee's formidable soldiers, even in their weakened state. He followed, but he did not strike with the ferocity that his commander-in-chief in Washington was desperately hoping for. After a harrowing week of waiting and fending off probes, the river finally recedes enough for Lee's engineers to build a new bridge. Under the cover of darkness, the last elements of the Army of Northern Virginia slip back across the Potomac, escaping the trap. They have been terribly wounded, but they have survived. You are no longer in the mud of Virginia. You are far from the sound of the guns. Your perspective shifts to the political heart of the Union, the sweltering, anxious city of Washington, D.C. during the last days of June and the first days of July. The city has been holding its collective breath. Lee's army is somewhere in the north, and for a terrifying period, no one is entirely sure where. Rumors fly like summer insects, each more frightening than the last. The capital itself feels vulnerable, exposed, and at the center of this storm of anxiety is one man. You see him often, walking the short distance between the White House and the War Department. He is impossibly tall and gaunt, his face a roadmap of exhaustion. Abraham Lincoln has been practically living in the War Department's telegraph office, a small room filled with the frantic clicking of machines that are the nation's nervous system. He sits for hours, reading the dispatches as they come in, his long legs propped up, his expression a mask of deep, weary concentration. Then, the news begins to trickle in. A great battle at a small Pennsylvania town. The first day, a Union defeat. The second, a desperate struggle. The tension in the room is unbearable. And then, late on July 3rd, and more fully on the 4th, the reports confirm it. Victory. A complete and stunning victory. A wave of profound relief washes over the city. Church bells ring. People pour into the streets, cheering and singing. The victory, coming on the nation's birthday, feels like a sign from God, a divine affirmation of the Union cause. Lincoln, a man not given to public displays of emotion, is visibly overjoyed. He believes this is it, the beginning of the end. He has found a general, in Meade, who has met Lee on an open field and beaten him. But as the days drag on, Lincoln's initial euphoria begins to curdle into a familiar, gnawing frustration. The telegraph clicks out the story. Lee is in full retreat. Meade is following, but cautiously. Then comes the news that seems too good to be true. Lee's army is trapped at the Potomac River, the bridges destroyed, the water too high to ford. They are cornered, their backs to the wall. Lincoln sees the war laid out before him like a chessboard, and this is checkmate. He sees the golden opportunity, the chance not just to win a battle, but to annihilate the Army of Northern Virginia and end the rebellion in a single, decisive stroke. He begins sending a flurry of telegrams to Meade, messages that start as encouragement and gradually become more insistent, more prodding. The opportunity to attack his divided forces should not be lost, he urges. Act upon your own judgment, and make your generals execute your orders. Call no council of war. Do not let the enemy escape. And then, on July 14th, the final, crushing message arrives. Lee has escaped. He has managed to build a bridge and slip his entire army back across the river during the night. The golden opportunity is gone. Lincoln's reaction is not one of explosive anger, but of a deep, soul-crushing disappointment. You can see him absorb the news, his shoulders slumping, the light of victory in his eyes dimming into a familiar weariness. He sits down at his desk, takes up his pen, and writes a letter to General Meade. The words that flow from his pen are not the measured prose of a president. They are the raw, unfiltered thoughts of a man whose greatest hope has just been snatched away. I do not believe you appreciate the magnitude of the misfortune involved in Lee's escape, he writes. He was within your easy grasp, and to have closed upon him would, in connection with our other late successes, have ended the war. As it is, the war will be prolonged indefinitely. He finishes the letter with a devastating final sentence. Your golden opportunity is gone, and I am distressed immeasurably because of it. He folds the letter, places it in an envelope, and then he pauses. He holds it in his hand, this distillation of all his frustration and grief, and then, in a moment of profound leadership and empathy, he puts it aside. He will never send it. On the envelope, he writes, "To Jen, Meade, never sent, and never signed." He understood, in that moment, that the letter would only crush the spirit of the man who had, after all, just won the most important battle of the war. It would serve no purpose but to vent his own pain. Historians still debate whether Meade, with his exhausted and battered army, could have realistically mounted a successful all-out assault against Lee's entrenched veterans, even with their backs to the river. But for Lincoln, the chance was all that mattered. That unsent letter, a phantom of what might have been, becomes a silent testament to the moment the war could have ended, but didn't. While presidents and generals fret over missed opportunities and the grand strategy of a prolonged war, back in Gettysburg, a different kind of war is just beginning. It is a war against decay, against memory, and against the overwhelming presence of death. The two great armies have moved on, their flags and cannons disappearing over the southern horizon, but they have left something behind. A scar on the earth and a stain on the air. You are now a resident of this small town, emerging from your cellar after 3 days of terror. The first thing that hits you is the smell. It is a sweet, sickly, cloying odor that clings to the back of your throat and permeates everything. It is the smell of thousands of unburied men and horses bloating under the relentless July sun. It is a miasma of death that will hang over this town for weeks, a constant, inescapable reminder of what has happened here. The scale of the problem is almost impossible to comprehend. The fields and woods around your home are littered with the bodies of over 7,000 men. Added to this are the corpses of more than 5,000 horses and mules, their swollen carcasses a grotesque feature of the landscape. The town's 2,400 residents are now faced with a public health crisis of apocalyptic proportions. How do you even begin? The initial burials are a desperate, frantic affair. Small teams of citizens and hired laborers go out onto the fields, digging shallow, temporary graves, often marking them with nothing more than a hastily scribbled name on a piece of wood, if a name is even known. The work is grim, stomach-turning, and performed in oppressive heat, tormented by clouds of black flies. Amidst this landscape of anonymous death, one story stands out because of its unique, tragic intimacy. The story of Jenny Wade. She was just 20 years old, a seamstress, living in a small brick house on the edge of town. On the morning of July 3rd, while the great cannonade was just beginning to roar, she was in her sister's kitchen, kneading dough, baking bread for the Union soldiers. She was not a soldier. She was not a part of the fight. She was an unwilling participant, trapped in her home as the battle raged around it. A single stray bullet, fired from nearly half a mile away, passed through 2 wooden doors and struck her in the back, killing her instantly. She would become the only direct civilian casualty of the entire 3-day battle, a widely known historical fact that somehow makes the vast, impersonal slaughter feel personal again. Her death, in the simple act of providing comfort, is a heartbreaking symbol of how war consumes everything in its path. The task of cleaning up is monumental. The dead horses are a particular problem. They are too large to bury easily. The solution is as grim as the problem. They are dragged into huge piles, doused with flammable materials, and set alight, creating vast, foul-smelling pyres that burn for days, their greasy black smoke a constant funeral pall on the horizon. Historians and psychologists still debate the long-term psychological trauma inflicted on the residents of Gettysburg, who lived for months surrounded by the sights, sounds, and smells of mass death. Eventually, a more organized effort begins. A local attorney named David Wills proposes the creation of a proper national cemetery. a final resting place for the Union dead. The state of Pennsylvania purchases 17 acres on Cemetery Hill, and the painstaking, gruesome work of exhuming thousands of bodies from their shallow battlefield graves and reinterring them begins. It is a project that will take months, a quiet, somber effort to bring order and dignity to the chaos of the battle's aftermath. And it is this project that will set the stage for a short, simple speech that will give this ocean of blood a meaning it did not yet possess. The raw, physical work of the aftermath slowly gives way to a more profound task, the work of consecration. 4.5 months have passed. It is now November, and a cold, sharp wind blows across the hills of Gettysburg. You are here again, but this time you are not a soldier. You are a citizen, one of thousands who have gathered on Cemetery Hill for the dedication of the new Soldiers' National Cemetery. The landscape has begun to heal. The shallow graves have been emptied, their occupants now resting in neat, concentric semicircles on the hillside. The smell of death has finally been scoured from the air by the autumn winds, but the scars remain. The trees are still shattered and leafless, and every citizen here carries their own invisible wounds of memory and loss. The atmosphere is somber, a sea of black coats and veiled hats under a grey, unforgiving sky. The main event of the day, the reason everyone has gathered, is to hear a speech from Mr. Edward Everett. He is the keynote speaker, the most famous orator of his generation. For 2 hours, he holds the crowd spellbound with a magnificent, classical oration. He recounts the entire battle in breathtaking detail, drawing parallels to the ancient Greeks at Marathon. His speech is a masterpiece of 19th century rhetoric, a towering monument of words. You listen, impressed by his eloquence, but perhaps also a little numbed by its sheer length and intellectual weight. When he finally concludes, there is polite, respectful applause. The main purpose of the day has been fulfilled. Then, as almost an afterthought, the President of the United States is introduced to offer a few appropriate remarks. Abraham Lincoln rises from his chair. He is a tall, almost awkward figure, his new black suit seeming a little ill. He unfolds a piece of paper and adjusts his spectacles. When he speaks, his voice is not the deep, booming baritone you might expect. It is a high, reedy voice, with a distinct Kentucky accent that strikes many in the eastern crowd as slightly rustic, and he begins. 407 years ago. The words are simple, almost shockingly so. After Everett's flowery prose, there are no classical allusions, no complex sentences. He speaks for less than 3 minutes. He delivers a mere 10 sentences, 272 words, and in those few moments, he redefines the very meaning of the war and of America itself. He doesn't just talk about the battle, he connects the sacrifice on this field directly back to the nation's founding principle that all men are created equal. He gives this horrific, chaotic slaughter a profound and noble purpose. The men who died here, he says, did not just die to preserve the old Union. They died so that the nation might have a new birth of freedom. The crowd's reaction is muted. It was over so quickly. Some reports say there was only scattered applause, a sense of confusion that the president's remarks had been so brief. A popular legend holds that a photographer, planning to take a picture of the president speaking, didn't even have time to uncap his lens. Historians still debate precisely when Lincoln finalized the text, with 5 slightly different surviving copies showing his careful, evolving thoughts on these crucial words. But the power of the speech was not lost on everyone. Edward Everett himself, the great orator, wrote to Lincoln the next day with incredible humility. I should be glad if I could flatter myself that I came as near to the central idea of the occasion in 2 hours as you did in 2 minutes. Those 10 sentences, delivered as a brief addendum to a great oration, would become the most famous speech in American history. They transformed a bloody battlefield into a sacred symbol and a brutal civil war into a moral crusade for the soul of the nation. The fate that had hung by a thread in July was now woven into a new national tapestry, one defined not just by union, but by freedom. And now the story has been told. The echoes of the cannons have faded, and the impassioned words of presidents have settled into the quiet pages of history, leaving only the soft stillness of the present moment. You can feel the great weight of that story begin to lift from your shoulders now, its immense drama and sorrow gently dissolving like mist in the morning sun. All of the struggle, all of the fear, and all of the courage of those long ago days can now be released, allowed to drift away into the peaceful expanse of the past. There is nothing more for you to do, nothing more for you to hold on to, except for the calm and quiet that is beginning to fill the space around you. You are safe now, far from the fields of conflict, resting in your own secure and tranquil harbor. Let the rhythm of your own breathing be the only cadence you follow, a gentle, easy, and natural flow that carries you further and further away from the noise of the world. Each breath is an invitation